Matthew 19, verses 1 through 12. Matthew 19, verses 1 through 12. When we look at these words of the Master, where we see and go through all of the times that Yeshua speaks and the situations that caused him to speak. And we see over here in Matthew's chapter 19 where an interesting discussion comes about. I guess we'll go ahead and let's read through these 12 verses and then we'll go back and talk about them. Matthew 19. Oh, actually, what we have in this section here is Matthew 19 and also Mark 10, 1 through 12, which I think really doesn't give us more. And so we can basically focus on the Matthew section, but also we see the same thing in Mark 10, 1 through 12, the same situation. And so we'll look at Matthew 19, 1 through 12. But I just wanted to let that be known that the same situation is also in Mark 10, 1 through 12. But we're going to read Matthew 19, 1 through 12.
All right, Matthew chapter 19. And it came to be when Yeshua had ended these words that he left Galilee and came to the borders of Judah beyond the Jordan. And large crowds followed him, and he healed them there. And the Pharisees came to him, trying him and saying to him, "Is it right for a man to put away his wife for every reason?" And he answering said to them, "Did you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this cause a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and these two shall become one flesh? So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what Elohim has joined together, let no man separate." They said to him, "Why then did Moshe command to give a certificate of divorce and to put her away?" He said to them, "Because of the hardness of your hearts, Moshe allowed you to put away your wives. From the beginning it was not so. But from the beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever puts away his wife, except on the grounds of whoring and marrying another, commits adultery. And whoever marries her who has been put away commits adultery." His top ones said to him, "If such is the case of the man with his wife, is it good not to marry?" And he said to them, "Not all receive this word, but only those to whom it has been given. For there are eunuchs who were so born from their mother's womb, and there are eunuchs who were made eunuchs by men, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the reign of the heavens. He who is able to receive it, let him receive it."
All right, very good. All right, so let's go back up here as we follow Yeshua as he goes through his journeyings back and forth. He's going up and down throughout the land. We saw, before where he was going through and he gets to this certain city, and it's an unnamed city, but it just so happens that there's Samaritans there. Again, it was probably one of the bordering cities, that included the Samaritans, where these lepers were. But here, when it tells us where he ends those words that he was saying, whatever he said in Matthew 18, we left Galilee and came to the borders of Yehuda. We've looked at our map over and over again, understanding that Galilee and Yehuda, the land, they don't border one another. There's land in between. And so to get from one to the other, you have to go through Samaria. And so, huh? Oh, yes. Yes. Judea and Galilee don't touch. Right? They don't touch. Samaria is in the middle. And so you have to go through that land in order to get to the other place. It's all the land, but of course it is controlled by these other peoples. And so there's a lot going on in verse 1 and 2. Because, as he goes, these large crowds, they follow him and they are healed by him. This is a huge part of what it is that Yeshua does in his ministry is, healing these people. So we see that, his life, it goes on. And so as we get to verse 3, this interesting thing is asked of him. He oftentimes comes into contact with Pharisees. Pharisees, a sect of Jews who, we learned just the other week that there is a close connection with the name there, with the idea of interpreting or dissecting, right? Which is something that they actually did with the scriptures, right? And so they go, and it says that they trying him. Let's look at that word. They're trying to understand that these people, they're doing just kind of what it says. This in my younger days, as I'm entering into my older days, fully grown.
You're fully grown?
I'm fully grown. Yeah. If someone tried you, you was about to fight. Oh, you trying me? Like that was something that we might say. And so just the way that you might say that back in my day, this is what is happening with the Pharisees here, trying him. That word there, pirazo, that is endeavor, scrutinize, entice, discipline, right? They were scrutinizing Yeshua. They were asking him these questions, maybe not for an answer necessarily, not like, it's one thing to ask a question and you want to know what the answer is, but it's another thing to ask the question to know what it is that you're going to say.
Next.
And when we see this particular question, the way in which they ask it, which we don't really know unless we do some extra investigating, they ask it in this way, and they're saying something just simply by asking it in this way. But you can't know that unless you actually look a little closer into the things that are kind of going on in this time. Because if they say, is it right for a man to put away his wife for every reason? That in and of itself is kind of a loaded question. There's subtext involved in even that question, the way that it's asked, that if you don't know who the players are in the situation, you don't understand fully what is happening here. You know, kind of like how if we amongst ourselves might talk about something being goofy. Like for us, you know, that is like, it's like an inside thing.
Specific to one person.
Yeah, and so we kind of, as sometimes me at least, kind of move it out into other arenas. If I'm speaking about something that I want to talk about, or a person, and it turns into kind of this slur almost. But it's really but it's an inside thing though. Like if you don't know us in the context of when this whole thing started for us, to you it's just like the Disney character or something. Right? There's another thing that's going on with that word that you don't get. But the people, the insiders, they understand it. And so the same thing is happening over here. With this, the insiders understand that what's happening here really is a question that puts Yeshua either on the side of Hillel or on the side of Shammai, who were kind of these leading schools of the Pharisees at the time. And when you think about, again, Yeshua is being tried by these people. And so if Yeshua is leaning, it's interesting because when you look at Hillel, for instance, he would have been more lenient with things. He had a propensity for leniency in his rulings. He's dead at this time when Yeshua walks the earth. He's dead already. But his school exists, and his teachings, his thoughts about things are there. When Yeshua, it's interesting that when Yeshua talks about do unto others as you would have them do unto you, it's kind of almost the positive of something that Hillel says in the negative. Let me see if where I have this at here, because it's interesting. You know, people talk about Yeshua and you know what he has to say about the Pharisees. But one of Yeshua's main quotes that he says is kind of like a remix of what Hillel says, but just said in a different way. Let me see what I did with that. I'm not sure what I did with it. I got so much stuff all over the place. But the point is that so Yeshua sometimes looks like he is leaning towards Hillel's teachings. And so if you ask him a question then, and you ask him in a way that's kind of to answer it in, so if he says yes, like, is it right for a man to put away his wife for every reason. If he says yes, he affirms Hillel's position. Because Hillel's position basically is if the wife, she does something that you don't like, whatever it is, you can get rid of her. It could be something as trivial as the way that she cooks things. Right? It can be anything basically that you find it could be nothing to have to do with her, and it could be that you find someone that's more beautiful. And then you could just get rid of her because you wanted to choose this other one. And so if he just says yes, he agrees with Hillel, and then all the people that may follow him as a result of his Hillel-leaning thoughts are offended now. But again, if we don't understand the subtext of all of this, then we miss that. But this is what he says. Is it right for a man to put away his wife for every reason? That the Pharisees saying that implicate Hillel and his teachings. Okay, so that's number one.
The thing what Hillel had said.
Huh?
Did you look for what Hillel had said?
It's in the Pirkei Avot is where it's at.
Well, that which is hateful unto you, do not
Yes,
do to your neighbor.
that. What did it say?
That which is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor.
Yes. So that's like the negative, saying it from the negative aspect. When you say it from the positive, is what Yeshua said. If you say it from the negative, is what Hillel said, but it's the same thing.
It's the opposite thing. That's what the kids say.
Yeah. Okay, that just to say that Yeshua, in some of the things, not everything now, but in some of the things, he is Hillel leaning. Yeshua is. And so they're asking him this question kind of as a one-up. Right? If he says it one way, the one side can be like, yes, he's on my side. And then the other ones, but really, again, this whole thing is really just going to cause more separation. Mm-hmm. Right? But the whole point of it is to scrutinize Yeshua. Mm-hmm. Right? That's the whole point, number one. And so number two is that...
Or I'm not to cut you off,
Go ahead.
but to add to, in Ecclesiasticus,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking maybe they is referencing this, or
What
who
does
was it, Hillel, whoever you was talking about?
Mm-hmm.
When they say, Ecclesiasticus 25:26, if she go not as thou wouldest have her, cut her off from thy flesh, and give her a bill of divorce, and let her go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if they had that in their teachings,
Yeah, and so Hillel would have been so those apocryphal books come into existence in the time like before Yeshua was born. And so Hillel is from like 110 before the current era. So, which is also before that time, and he lives all the way up until like 10 or something like that. They said he was like 120 years old. I don't know if that's mythological or what, but they said that he lived the same amount of years as Moses, 120 years.
They just said that. That was his students, like, pumping them out.
But he has a start and an end date.
I looked up some commentary just to try to figure out what he was talking about with Hillel, and he was more relaxed, but it was like, a man could divorce his wife if she spoiled his dinner, If she spun or went with her unbound hair or spoke to a man in the streets.
Yes. Yes. Right. And so we'll get to the leniency in terms of the interpretation. But comparatively speaking, one has kind of this propensity to be more relaxed,
The other more strict.
and the other one more strict. And again, Yeshua he's not always Hillel leaning. But he's a lot of times Hillel leaning. Sometimes he's Shammai leaning. And sometimes he's neither. Right? Because he don't officially belong to either one. But the point of what they're doing is to try Yeshua and his just what they did. Okay? And so again now, so the thing that puts it with one or the other is that last part, for every reason. But the other thing is, when we look at verse 1, here, pull up verse 3. Is it right for a man to put away his wife? Pull up that 6:30 right there. 6:30. 6:30. Okay, that is to free, to relieve, release, dismiss, or let die, pardon, or specifically it says divorce there. Let depart, dismiss, divorce, forgive, let go, loose, send away, release, set at liberty. Another thing that we have to think about whenever we look at this, understanding what the question is, we got to understand what's going on here. That word right there, it's not divorce. That word right there is not divorce. It's literally what it says. That's why they have it right there, and it's to put away. And so if we think about what is happening over here, it's interesting because it matters what these words mean. It matters what they mean because if the question is it right for a man to divorce his wife for any reason? That's saying one thing. But if it's saying is it right for him to put his wife away for any reason, that literally is saying another thing. It's not saying the same thing. To put his wife away is not divorcing her in and of itself. It's putting her away. Like it's putting her away. But you haven't technically divorced her. You go over there, and I'm not gonna mess with you no more. You don't gotta worry about your wifely duties anymore. Just go over there, and then I'm just gonna live my life. But when you think about the process, a lot of times, whenever there was a divorce, it's kind of like these things that they have nowadays, where the wife, she take half of your stuff. And those times they didn't take half, but there was something that they took that was part of the initial agreement. So they bring something to the situation. When they go, they take that same thing back out of their situation. And so there is a severance that happens, but there's also kind of a possession, a monetary possession that she takes. And so it's so much easier if I just be like, "Man, I'm not gonna mess with you. You go over there. I'm done with you. I'm gonna just move on with my life." And that's what these people was doing. They were just putting people away. But when you're doing that, they couldn't. She couldn't marry anymore because she was still already married.
You're in limbo.
She was in limbo. She was also what she was in a state of oppression. Right? And so, you know, there's more than what they could have said right there, but they didn't say the whole thing. They just said part of it. Okay? Oh, good.
So like they would have to pay, you know, the legal fees to get the scribes to do, you know, to do their work on their end. They'd have to pay back that bride price because she would get her inheritance from her father's house. Whenever she would get married, she would get her inheritance, which would go to him. Then he'd have to pay that back. And so they wasn't trying to pay. It was just like the cheaper to keeper type of a thing. But you know, like, you know, it's just, it's cheaper. Don't they say that?
Yeah, that was like an old time song.
Was it? Is it called? And so, you know, they didn't want to, they did not want to pay those fees. And so they would just be like, all right, you just go to your dad's house or whatever. And we'll still be married, but, you know, you're put away.
Yeah. Yeah, and so when you look at this now, when we think about there's a couple things going on here. They're trying Yeshua in his, you know, in who he connects with kind of doctrinally. And then by him saying whatever he might say, you know, ostracizing himself from the other sides, the different leanings, you know, there's that. And so also you'll have the two schools involved, but then you also got the women that are standing there listening, saying, what's he gonna say? Like, is he gonna stand up for our rights at all?
Women's rights, you know what I'm saying?
All right, and so there's all of these things like this. This is like a tricky thing that they're asking him, you know, and again they're asking him in the, you know, in the earshot of all of these others. Oh yes, a chained woman is the woman. That's somebody who put something in the comments there. The chained woman was that woman who was just only put away, not divorced, but just put away, where she now is in this limbo state. She couldn't remarry, but she didn't have a husband. Well, she had a husband, but the husband wasn't treating her like he was her husband. He relinquished her from. He put her away from himself, removed his protection from her physically, but not kind of legally. All right, so let's keep on going. And so Yeshua, in his answer, he says, he takes it back to Genesis. You know, they're asking him about this situation. The idea of marriage, we take it all the way back to Genesis, is a permanent thing. Like, that's how it was created to be. You was two, and now you're one. Like, he goes all the way back to Adam and Hava. That's in his answer. Did you not read? Made them in the beginning. He made them male and female, and he caused a man to leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and the two become one flesh. And so, therefore, he said, what Elohim has joined together, let no man separate. Oh, and then so now they got something to work with. Oh, you said what? Well, what about this then, Yeshua? What about what Moses said?
You trying to get the Torah?
And then look what it says, and go to verse 7. Go to verse 7 there. Because this is what we're looking for right here. Because it says, read verse 7 again right there.
It said to him, why did Moshe command to give a certificate of divorce and to put her away?
Okay, so that's two things right there. Okay, look at those words there in verse 7. Over there, what's that? The writing of divorcement, what's that? Yeah, that. That's some other word. Apostasy.
You got your Greek.
No, I don't. So that's a thing. That's a thing. They were writing of divorcement, the actual divorce decree, the paper, right? The official thing, and to put her away. That's back at the word. That's the separation thing. So
It's two things. Right?
So let's go over.
Why would they really try to sneak it in there like that?
What you mean?
They try to sneak that bill of divorcement and put her away. Like, why would they try to sneak it in?
Yeah, because they didn't lead with that, right? They didn't lead with that. So when Yeshua talks to them, he talks to them kind of in this general way about what marriage was created to be. It was created to be what it is. So it was created to be a forever thing.
Are they justifying it, or are they just still trying that?
Oh, they're always trying them. They're never not trying them. But he said what he said, but he didn't take it back to the law. And so now they say, I got you now. What about Moses? Like, if I can't set you against Hillel and Shammai, let me set you against Moses. And so let's go over to Deuteronomy chapter 24.
You said what?
Deuteronomy 24.
Oh, that's right here.
Deuteronomy 24. Let's read 1 through 4.
Deuteronomy 24:1. Make sure I'm the right one. When a man takes a wife and shall marry her, then it shall be, if he finds no favor in his eyes, because he has found a matter of uncoveredness in her, and he shall write her a certificate of divorce and put it in her hand and send her out of his house. And if she left his house and went and became another man's wife, and the latter husband shall hate her and write her a certificate of divorce and put it in her hand and send her out of his house, or when the latter husband dies, who took her to be his wife, then her former husband, who sent her away, is not allowed to take her back to be his wife after she has been defiled, for that would be an abomination before Yahweh. And do not bring sin on the land which Yahweh your Elohim has given you as an inheritance.
Okay, very good. So there's a few things that we see here. First of all, in Deuteronomy, in the Torah, there is provision for this idea about divorce. And this is the thing that the Pharisees, that they bring up. Yeshua takes it all the way back to pre-Torah. He takes it all the way back to the creation of marriage. And then the Pharisees, they're like, hold on, what about Moses? And so we look at Deuteronomy 24, we see this thing here. First of all, that this man finds some matter of uncleanness in her, and then, but what happens is that he writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand. And he sends her out of his house. And so you have the giving of this certificate of divorce, this official document, and is put in her hand, just like how you got whenever you get like a whenever you get like a summons or something like that, where you know they literally gotta like give it to you, right? Where it's like some certified mail to say that you actually got this thing. It's the same kind of a thing where you have the actual paperwork and then put it in her hand and send her out. So there's these two things that are involved in it. Then just put her out. Two different situations, two words over here. This certificate of divorce and sending her away. Here, look at that 24 there. Pull up the Strongs on there. Okay, so what do we got there? Write a bill of divorcement. What's that word there? That's the carry tote. The carry tote. This is the cutting of the matrimonial bond. This is the actual official divorcement here. This cutting of the matrimonial bond. So you take this thing, you put it in her hand, and you send her away. Okay, so first of all, when they started off, they didn't get to this. They didn't say all of this. They just said this putting her away part. And this is important to understand how to think about this going forward. But when we go back to the Torah, there's this. And so this happens in verse 1. And then she's literally able to go and marry someone else. Now, there is the thing, if we go down, that the first wife can't go and marry someone else and then come back to the first husband. Because there is kind of this weird kind of shameful connection thing that happens that she can't reverse the thing. But she's actually able to go and marry someone. She's able to go and marry someone, and that was an actual marriage.
Yeah.
That happened. He took her, and then if he didn't have no problems with her, they could have just lived their lives together and everything be good. But in the event that she really was just a terrible person, and that second person couldn't find no uncleanness in her, or he dies, either way, she wasn't able to go back to the other thing. But that in and of itself, it verifies the second thing, though.
Yes.
What?
And I don't know if you want to say this, but it couldn't have been for adultery because the penalty for adultery was theft.
Okay, so yes, we'll talk about this, but just in a few moments. Okay, so the way we get to that conversation is going back into 24 verse 1 and seeing where the controversy even is, where the Hillites and the Shamites come up with their argument. And it has everything to do with this thing over here. If she finds no favor in his eyes, because he has found a matter of uncoveredness. Now, if we go to verse 1, let's look at that word there, uncoveredness. Because we would say probably that the Shamites would emphasize this word here. Erva, or erwa, if you were my Hebrew teacher. Erva, which is nudity, the padunda, the progenitive parts, disgrace, blemish, nakedness, shame. There's some places where erva is used, and it's used in a way that talks about not just some form of immorality, but kind of a here. Go to the KJV concordance.
Oh, okay.
It's in the yes. Hold on. Go to Genesis 9:22 and 23. Pull that up right there. Read for us verses 22 and 23.
All right, Genesis 9:22. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. So Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both of their shoulders, and went backward and covered the nakedness of their father. But their faces were turned away, and they did not see their father's nakedness.
Okay, very good. So nakedness there is our word erva. And so when we think about like this is an interesting thing because it don't really tell us everything that happened necessarily. And it really could be something terribly nasty that happens right here. When we see this idea of the son seeing the nakedness of his father. This really could be some sexual immorality right there, and then that's our word. And so if we go back to, I don't want to be too graphic, but we could just, you know what I mean. And so if we go back to Deuteronomy 24 and think about then what this verse means, if he has found a matter of erva in her, 24, Deuteronomy 24, verse 1. If he found some type of sexual immorality in her, if he goes and finds out that she's not a maiden, let's say, that would be maybe some sexual immorality. She's not who she said that she was. She was doing some funny business prior. And so this is part of the interpretation of those who would say that this uncleanness is some form of adultery. The problem with that thought process is that if there's adultery, then the wife and the adulterer, the male, could be killed. And so if you're saying that and this is kind of what the thought process of those from the school of Shammai might say, this uncleanness, if the emphasis is on the erva, if the emphasis is on the erva, which means sexual immorality, that's the reason why you would give them the certificate of divorce. This is their thought process, because they're emphasizing the erva. But again, if we say that that's the issue, it goes against these other things that happen in Torah, because if you found out that she was, first of all, if she was caught being erva, let's say, if she's literally caught, then she could be killed. So there's no reason to divorce her, just stone her. And stone him too, like the scripture says. But even if he thought in his mind that she maybe wasn't who she was and she was doing things that she shouldn't have been done, he could just take her to the priest to find out. Yes, to drink the jealousy juice, and then if she was guilty, then her guts would rot. And so you got these things that would happen if that was the case. And so now you have the other side, which is saying that the emphasis shouldn't necessarily be on the erva, but it says has found a matter of uncoveredness, davar erva. Okay, pull that word up there.
Anything.
Found some matter. The word is davar, a thing of uncleanness, right? And so now it's a type of uncleanness, because if you think about it as if we was to say it was just sexual immorality just in and of itself, why wouldn't it be something like ha dabar? I mean ha erva. Like it would be a specific thing, but not like any matter of this davar thing as this caveat to the word, where it makes it be more than just this one thing, for one. But for two, if it was that, there's other places where we could look and see that if it's that, there's other things that happen. Like she don't live to tell the story. Right? No one does. And if there's no witnesses and he just has a thought about it, then he could take her to the priest to find out with the thing. And so that's really how you get into this idea of, where the interpretation kind of breakdown is. Like, which one is it? And so you kind of see where, how this can turn into, and it literally did turn into this big situation between the two schools, one believing one way, one believing the other way, and why they sit up there and take it to Yeshua in the first place. But when we go over to Deuteronomy 24, just like they did, not only do we see this idea of this davar erva, this matter of uncleanness, but we also see the fact that there's the emphasis on the two aspects, the bill of divorce and the sending away. Go ahead.
I was wondering, I was thinking about Joseph and Mary, and could some of this, like, why people aren't killed, be that some of the people, like, they actually care about them, so they just kind of sneak them away and divorce them? Like, Joseph was about to dip, but the angel told him, no, like, this is my baby, or, this is Yahweh's baby. But, like, that's what I was thinking about that. How could that correlate?
You saying because of
He didn't tell on her. Like, at first he was just gonna.
well, he was going to though. He was going to until the angel came.
Oh, he was going. I
Yeah, that's what happened, right? He thought to put her away.
I thought he was just
But-
gonna get rid of her.
Well,
I don't know.
he may have just sent her away and not.
Like,
But
fished on her.
either way, what he thought to do, which no matter how much he cared about her, he didn't care enough about her to want to be with her still. Yeah, like I ain't doing that. Like you know, you know what I'm saying, but I can't do this. And then it took the angel, the messenger of the Most High, coming and telling him about it in order for him not to do anything. So whether he was going to actually give her the paperwork or just put her away, he was getting ready to do one of the two of those things.
Was they even married yet?
They were betrothed,
Okay.
which it don't matter if you're betrothed, and then if some other person comes in, you both get killed according to the law. Right? So they was betrothed, but they never consummated. So they didn't never make it to the second step of marriage, but it was the first step, which still has the same penalty. That's why he was getting ready to do one of the two of the other things. And so, but this is a thing though, this idea of just putting away. Like even, you could make the argument that even he was about to just get into this thing that at this time was part of the culture, just to be putting people away. Now in his case, you know, maybe he did feel a certain kind of way over and didn't want her to get in trouble and was trying to just be nice to her and show mercy and just put her away and not give her the actual thing. Right? But this was a thing that people did, and this is why they're asking the question to begin with, this idea of, is it right for somebody to just put a wife away for any reason? And so again, Yeshua, I mean the Pharisees, when they bring up Moses now, they bring up Moses as this thing of you playing games, you didn't even take it back to the Torah. Let us do it. We'll take it back to the Torah. What you got to say about this? And then so Yeshua says here, read verse 8 again right there.
He said to them, because of the hardness of your hearts, Moshe allowed you to put away your wives, but from the beginning it was not so.
Okay, now he justifies, I think Yeshua justifies going back to the beginning, because he's saying this thing that Moses did, Moses allowed you to put away your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. But what's he saying right here? Did Moses speak his own words? Or is the things that Moses say, the things that he says, is that in some way inferior to what the things that the Most High say? Does Moses come out and say things that the Most High don't want for them to be said? Let's go to John 1 and 16 through 18.
John 1 and 16. And out of his completeness, we all did receive and favor upon favor. For the Torah was given through Moshe. The favor of the truth came through Yeshua Messiah.
Hold up. What does the King James say right there?
Okay. And of his fullness.
Oh, it says the law was given by. Okay, let's look at 1 Corinthians 9 and 9. Because that's not weighty enough there to say that the law came through Moses.
1 Corinthians 9 and 9.
Oh yeah.
And the
What's that
KJV.
one say right there?
It says, "For it is written in the law of Moses, thou shalt not muzzle the mouth of the ox that treadeth out the corn. Doeth Yahweh take care of the oxen?"
Okay, so here it's talking about the Torah, but it refers to it as the law of Moses. It refers to the Torah as the law of Moses. Is there a difference? Is there a difference between the Torah and the law of Moses? Question mark. You say,
Is there a difference between the Torah and the law of Moses?
are they different or are they the same?
Well, I mean, it says they sing to him.
Is it Moses' laws? Did he come up with it?
Well, the other verse said the law came through Moses. So every single thing, every single law that was given came through Moses
By who though?
by the Most High.
Yeah.
Now, there is the fact that there are places in the Torah that are, first of all, considered Torah, that it don't say, "Thus says Yahweh." Now, when you do kind of a inventory, probably 90% of the Torah can be directly connected to what the Most High said. But that other 10%, Moses said it. And it's interesting right here. This is one of those ones. Here.
With the you shall not muzzle the ox.
Yeah, where did Most High say? Go back and see if you can see where the Most High is connected to that. It's hard to find it. I don't think you will. Okay? Okay, but look at how Paul's using it though. Go back to 1 Corinthians. The way Paul's using it though,
1 Corinthians what?
9.
9 verse
9.
9 verse 9.
He's using it in such a way in referencing to what the Most High's thoughts are about the ox. He's saying it in, I don't know why that person got to blow their horn like that. He's saying it in such a way where it's pointing back to what the Most High's desire is about the ox. See, the Most High cares about the ox. That he's not going to muzzle the ox and stop him from eating while he's working. Paul's trying to make this, the idea that you ain't gonna hook the brethren up that's out here doing this work. You ain't gonna hook the brothers up. The Most High won't muzzle the ox. Why you gonna sit up here and try to not hook up the people? But the point is that he's saying that thing that Moses said that you can't necessarily connect to the Most High. But did the Most High not? He did not allow it.
Right.
The Moses was the mouthpiece of the Most High. The things that he said, the Most High let him say it, and he didn't like, say for instance, Aaron. We talked about Aaron. Aaron's problem was a repeated problem. Aaron was silent when he should have said something. He should have talked. Instead, he didn't talk. His silence was agreement with whatever the thing was that happened,
Yeah.
right? Whether it be the golden calf, or whether it be his sister talking up against Moses, or whether it be Moses striking a rock. Either one of those times, Aaron should have talked, and he didn't talk. And the Most High said, take your brother up into this mountain over here. Aaron, you take off your clothes, you stripped of your priestly garments, and you gonna die over here. And so the Most High gonna punish Aaron for not talking, but then he ain't gonna talk. He's gonna be silent when Moses comes up with these laws, quote unquote. No. Whatever we see that is the law, that is the Torah, that we can't connect necessarily to, it don't say, and thus said Yahweh to Moses or whatever. We assume that Moses got the okay.
Yeah.
We have to assume.
So, I mean, in Revelation it says they sing the song of Moses, the servant of Yah, and the song of the Lamb. So it's obviously Moses and the Torah are inseparably connected to each other.
Yes, and there's no distinction. And people
Except
try.
for the end of Deuteronomy, unless Moses pre-wrote about his death before, maybe Joshua wrote that little last part.
If we just keep it in terms of the laws,
Yes, the law.
and not the historical account, the narrative. Those things are from Moses, and the Most High said it's okay. Oh, Luke 24 and 44. That's a good one there too. Luke 44 and 24. Luke 24, verse 44. What's that?
Let me switch back. And he said to them, these are the words which I spoke to you while I was still with you, that all have to be fulfilled or filled, that were written in the Torah of Moshe and the prophets and the Torah concerning me.
Okay, the law of Moses. So we can't think that only means the little bit of laws that Moses came up with that the Most High did.
I'm sorry. I don't know who came up with this.
What?
Was that the
What?
Was that the Hillel and the Shep?
No. People, this is a real thing.
People were,
Where if it's the law of Moses is different than the law, than the Torah, than the law of the Most High. Like people sit up there and talk to you about, well, that's the law of Moses. Moses wrote that. And so to make a distinction between the two, and there is no distinction. Yeshua here is saying that the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms,
speaking of me.
the whole Tanakh, but the Torah part, he literally calls the law of Moses. And so when we go back over there, where he says over here, because of the hardness of man's hearts, Moses allowed for this thing to happen. Yeshua isn't making a distinction between what the law of Moses is and the law of Yahweh. That's all I'm saying. He's calling it one thing, but he says over here that the whole reason, but to say that isn't to say, and so because of the hardness of your hearts, people's hearts, a law came into existence, basically. But from the beginning, it wasn't created to be in that way. So what Yeshua is actually doing is, while he's maintaining the strength of what marriage is supposed to be. It's supposed to be this thing that lasts forever. But because of the fact that you are a person, a human, a law had to be made in order to finish this thing. But from the beginning, he said, it wasn't so. But, okay, so keep on going now over here. And so again, so he don't diminish, he don't take away from the fact that marriage is supposed to be, forever. The issue, the question that was asked, can I just willy-nilly just put her away? And the answer that he gives, he goes back to just saying the one part of it, which is an important part of understanding what's being said over here. And so he said in verse 9, whoever puts away his wife. He didn't put that extra part in, which should be there, if he wanted for it to be there. Whoever puts away his wife, whoever puts her away and don't give her the actual paperwork, except on the ground of whoring, and marries another, commits adultery.
Well, I don't think it's out.
Well, think about it in this way, because
Not in that respect.
think about it in this way. When you think about some of the things that Yeshua said, if you hate your brother in your heart, you murdered him. As where he's giving you this thing where you're doing this thing inside of you that's worse than what you're physically doing. And so for you to take this woman and put her into this place of limbo, of a type of bondage, for you to do this, there's no grounds for you to do this. Except, of course, if she was a whore. And then so, if that was the case, then if she was doing things that she wasn't supposed to do, that's the only reason why you could do this thing without having the paperwork. Because it don't mention the paperwork here. It only mentions the first part. And so if she was to do such a thing, she's self-severing the covenant by the act.
And she's gonna get killed. But
I mean, if we keep in the law, then that's what happens to her, right?
she's gonna get her just rewards.
And so whoever deals with her, whoever deals with that person who was just sent away, was only sent away, whoever deals with her, you're committing adultery. And so, this part over here, it's only dealing with every place where we see this word being used here. If it's the whole situation, all of it is together. The writing of the divorcement and there's two parts. And so these people were habitually only doing the one part. And so he's saying, if this is what you're gonna be out here doing, she's out here burning your breakfast, and you putting her away and not divorcing her, you setting up in a situation where everybody's is in adultery here. Like he's putting the weight on this thing and preventing this this bondage that you're putting on this person. And then so much so that when you look at the disciples, they like, well, if I can't just put my wife away if she don't act right, why do I even get married then? That's what they like, because
Yeah.
that's the culture. It's so embedded into the culture that they was able to just, because again, you had these two schools, but the prevailing school was Hillel.
The lenient one.
The so-called lenient one, right? And so the disciples are like, man, if she could just act however she want to act, I can't put her away. Then what do I even need to get? Is it even good to be married? Like they can't even fathom these things that he's saying, right? But it's not saying that, you know, even go to Malachi. Even Malachi 2 and 16. Malachi 2 and 16. What's that say? Here, read 15 and 16.
Okay. And did he not make one? And he had the remnant of the Spirit. And what is the one alone? He seeks a seed of Elohim. So you shall guard your spirit and let none act treacherously against the wife of his youth. For I hate divorce, said Yahweh Elohim of Israel. And the one who covers his garment with cruelty, said Yahweh of hosts, so you shall guard your spirit and do not act treacherously.
Okay, these people in this time are doing these things. They're saying that they're the people of the Most High, yet they're dealing with these other nations and doing the things that's connected with these other nations. And so they're essentially putting their away the wife of their youth, the relationship that they have with, not saying that the Most High is the wife, but the idea is they have this covenant relationship. They're putting that aside, but not severing it. They're not saying I'm just going to be all the way pagan, but they're playing both sides of the fence. But and then when he says I hate divorce, that word there's not divorce. It's put away. It's the put away word. Because this is what the people was doing. They're living a halfway life of being Israel and saying that they're part of the covenant, but they're dealing with these other nations and then incorporating these customs of the other nations into their situation. And so they were essentially putting their covenant relationship away but not severing it. And the Most High said, you know, this is wrong.
You don't do that.
This is not right. Right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, it's almost like in business, there's the, if someone is fired or resigns from a company, the company is then obligated to put out notice that that person is no longer working for the company, or they could actually make covenants and contracts on behalf of the company because it looks like, you know, they still work there. So you're supposed to let everybody know that there's like this disconnection that's been done. And so people of the Most High, if they just decide to separate themselves from the Most High and it's not known, then what they do, people could assume represents the Most High.
Yeah. We are the representatives of the Most High. And so when you sit up here and say that you are that, but the things that you're doing don't show that, you putting a bad light on the Almighty. And so going back to Matthew, when we look at what's being said over here, first of all, the question as asked helps us understand what the answer is to the question. And then when we look at this, we don't even see the idea of the actual fullness of the thing. And so when we look over here at verse 9 again, when we see this thing here, the response that Yeshua is making is that you can't just, he don't agree with neither one of them. In fact, here. Because the one talks about there being this only, the only way is sexual immorality, but the other one say it could be whatever. But Yeshua is saying this idea of this just sending away just willy-nilly, you can't. Except if she's nasty.
And I think the exception is because she's gonna get, it doesn't really matter if you send her away or give her a divorce, she's still gonna get judgment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
You said, why pay when she's gonna get cut off anyway?
Right. Her end is basically sealed anyway, in the confines of Israel and how they operated. And so, you don't really even have to do the paperwork if at the end of the day what she's gonna get is judgment. And so again, the disciples, this is their culture. Why do we even marry then at all? Why would they say that? It's interesting. Like, that's how much of a thing this is. It just be putting people away. It's so much so that this is like a main signifier of who's who. And then Yeshua starts to talk about these eunuchs now.
This is part of it.
Go down to verse 12, dude. Can you read verse 12 again?
Yep. For there are eunuchs who were born so from their mother's womb, and there are eunuchs who were made eunuchs by men, and there were eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the reign of the heavens. He who is able to receive it, let him receive it.
Okay, so a eunuch really could be someone. Here, pull up the definition. The Bible is really just some things. Pull up the definition. Okay, it really could be somebody a castrated person. But it don't necessarily mean that somebody's sitting up there castrating themselves. Because it really could mean someone who's just not married.
Yeah.
And in the context of what it is that Yeshua is saying, that fits. Right? Why marry at all? Yeshua is saying, there's people who don't even get married. They don't got to worry about none of this. They've made themselves eunuchs.
So Fiskey heard something different on, I don't know, his things. What did you hear, baby?
I mean, it's a serious. It's not like it's a serious thing. I don't understand how someone could eunuchize themselves and not bleed to death and die.
Some people take that verse. It's like both people take that verse to say that. It's
Maybe if they take a hot knife and do it, where they cauterize themselves
What is it?
Yeah, that's how they
at the
would do
same
it.
time.
That's how they would do this slaves, yeah.
Just
The people,
tell me.
yeah.
Well, I guess if you have like one of those things that do like this, and it's hot,
Yeah.
where you cauterize yourself,
Okay, wait.
you could do it.
Yeah.
Wait, Fiskey.
But like to inflict that amount of pain on yourself. Because that's what he said
He's
right
not
there.
talking about.
He said, you know, who have made themselves eunuch for the sake of the reign of the heavens. I don't think he's talking about that.
Talking about nuns and priests.
Well, not nuns, but you know that came after. But just the idea of the Essenes, for
Well, this
instance,
scene was crazy.
the Essenes were eunuchs,
Yeah. That's
not
why y'all
because
got
they castrated themselves, but they didn't believe in procreating.
That's why y'all
And
got
so what they did was they would go and they would find children, like orphans, and bring the orphans in and, you know, raise the orphans up. You know, that's how they was able to keep
going.
themselves going, because they would bring orphans in. They would that's how they would. Otherwise, there'd be no.
That's but
They,
they
well,
did that
I mean, eventually they die off.
Yeah.
It seems because they didn't believe in procreation necessarily.
Hey, sound like kind of Paul didn't either.
Paul didn't either.
So-
Paul says, you know,
Paul died
everybody can't be like me.
Yeah, he like,
You know, but I don't because of instead of messing around with this woman, I could be doing things for the Most High. And you know, from a practical standpoint, I guess I could see what he's talking about, but it's not very practical to me. To me, like I wasn't one of these ones, right? I wasn't one that's able to receive this. Who's able to receive it? Not me. I'm not able to. But he's saying this in relation to what they were talking about. Like it's when you get into the situation with a woman where it's meant to be forever. Things happen. Sometimes it don't work. But you can't just be sending these people away just for nothing.
and you gotta pay.
You gotta pay. Like the bill of divorce was a document. They had to go to the place and they had essentially the bill of divorce was a letter of guiltlessness, where she was able to be freely let go and she was innocent. And so, you know, the person who, the one who went out and turns into a loose person, under what circumstances is she innocent? Like that's how could she's not innocent. In fact, she's guilty, and so that goes along with the whole idea of this whole thing with putting one away, the one who's put away, and that she's under the grounds of whoring, she could never be innocent.
And I think that's why she didn't have to get that bill either. But
Well, she couldn't, right? She couldn't because she wasn't innocent. But again, when you look at verse 12, the thing that he's saying is that, you know, some people, you know, that word also has to do with, you know, not functioning properly. Some people are just born and they're not even able to function properly, and they can't even do husband and wife things. Some people are made to be eunuchs, where it is something that's physically done to them, and they were used to be like, you know, people who watched over women, because there was no point where he was going to try to do anything, because he wasn't.
well, I mean,
He got
they
euthanized.
say that
I mean,
Daniel
euthanized.
was made into being a eunuch.
I said euthanized. I mean, that's a real thing. Like that's,
Yeah, I'm saying they say Daniel was made a eunuch when he,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
But
And so I
I
go
think
ahead.
on his feet, because this is the young culture. What he was saying, like the woke people, they try to say that this is where like
Woke people?
Yeah, they try to say this is where like there's room for like the.
That's slang. I mean, that's a slur.
Well, I'm
Okay.
saying that like that's where there's room for like the trans and the other.
Yeah,
people to be able to
yeah.
come
That's
in.
that's not this here. But
That's what I'm
this
just saying. They try
this
to
is
say that.
simply the idea of someone not having a relationship with a woman or anyone for that matter. It's not to say that this person he won't have it with women, but he has it. That doesn't make any
Yeah,
sense. Yeah,
that's-
it's
Now you
just
perverting it.
yeah. That's not what this is. Here.
Yeah.
If somebody tries to make the argument to say that that's what this is, then that
Yeah,
person
you're,
is goofy.
You're crazy. Yeah, there you go, goofy.
This ain't that, right? This is directly connected to this man marrying. They asked the question: if I can't do what I want to do, what's the even a point? And she
Right.
was saying, well, some people don't get married. Don't then. If you're able, don't. Because if you do, you know, there's some things that that you get into, right? But you know, just kind of just closing down with all of this, I think that it's interesting that, you know, again, you know, people come up with these things, and Yeshua, it's interesting when you look at the way that he even answers, where he begins to answer this, and he kind of doubles down on it when they come back with more questions. But he's really saying, what he's really saying is that this thing, marriage, it's meant to be permanent. It is meant to be permanent.
Yep.
But people act like people, and so there had to be provisions that was made. But even though when you look at the way that it was, like if something is created and is created to be a permanent, serious situation, it can't be like this haphazard like thing where it's not, you know, it's a very serious, weighty thing, and the people at the time didn't use it in that way.
Right.
And so that's why they was even asking the question to begin with, and they didn't even ask the fullness of the question, because really the question that they asked only had to do with the way that they were acting, which was just putting these people away, just sending them away, and not even doing the complete process over here. So that's the thing that Yeshua really is addressing. That's the way that's why he answered it the way that he did. But so I think that when people turn to this, you know, it makes people, it causes people really to be in bondage. Yes, people enter into this thing that was meant to be a permanent thing. But at the same time, the Most High makes a way for you to not be in bondage.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting too. I mean, this is talking about a relationship,
Yeah.
and just people's views on relationships, how to go about it, how to care for a relationship, how a relationship develops. You see it in today's society. I mean, how long do relationships last? Marriages last? What breaks up a marriage? Communication. I mean, it makes sense. Like but that's the hardness that Moses was talking about, where he had to leave that in because poor communication. I always use an example. Me and Ebony, when we got together, I'm like, look, if we ain't walking with this book together, then it's not gonna last. I can't see. I'd be surprised when people that aren't in the faith and their marriage lasts. You know, they've been like, yeah, we've been holding on, but you know, and behind the scenes, they probably crazy, throw stuff at each other, but they still, you know, make it work.
Yeah.
But they just got used to it or whatever.
Yeah.
But even, you know, for the young people today, it's like, if you're looking for a mate or talking about marriage, if this ain't the center point, because you need something in between your marriage as like the mediator.
Yeah.
To me, it's like this is the mediator. Because otherwise, you have arguments or you go back and forth. Yeah.
I mean,
So it says-
Paul tells us about the mystery of marriage. And he tells us about what it represents. It represents the coming together of Messiah and his body, the people. And when a man and a woman come together, it's a picture of that. But also, when we look at Israel as a people, that people they wasn't able to keep their part of the bargain. And so the Most High said, you know, here's your paperwork.
And he ain't even looking your
You got to get out of here.
Like, and all the nations came in and had their way. He like, I don't know you. He like, look, I don't know who that is.
But it was meant to be forever.
Yep.
But those people had to be cut. They had to be cut. That's what that word means. They had to be cut off. That word is cut off. We talked about the Shabbat earlier. Those people who when it talks about people being cut off from amongst Israel, is that word. It's the root. The root is the same root. And so there comes a time when it becomes necessary for there to be a cutoff. But that don't take away from the fact of its original purpose and its importance and the fact that it, you know, what it is actually meant to be, which is, you know, forever. Go ahead.
I was thinking how, obviously, Yahweh used Yeshua to make a way for him to take us back after our idolatry. So we went a horn, and then he taken us back, and if you think about it, that would be against the Torah.
Yes.
But he used Yeshua as that,
We
to
got to take that.
make us clean, and just how beautiful that is, because
Yeah,
really, it's
that's-
against his just ways.
I mean, this is such a high level comment. It's so interesting. People, when you think about who Yeshua is, like this thing that you bringing up here helps us to understand who Yeshua is. And we got to go back to the Torah. If a man has a wife, that son is not able to marry his father's wife. That's against the Torah. If the man's wife, if she becomes a whore, or she gets another husband, she can't come back. But yet and still, this is what we see pictured with Israel. Israel became the most terriblest of whores, where instead of getting money, she paying,
Yeah.
right? But yet and still, the Most High brings back. And so the difference is that we see with the fact that Yeshua, we understand, this is so high level. We understand Yeshua as the Son only for our own physical, abilities to be able to understand the thing. And so people get caught up with this whole idea of the Father and the Son and the Trinity or the Twinity, or that's not the word, I made that up, the Twinity. And this whole thing of who is Yeshua, is there one, is there two, is there three, are they the same? How did he talk to his own self and pray to himself and all of these things? But Yeshua's experience in this earth was just like a picture. It was just a moment. It just was like a snapshot in eternity.
That was the beginning.
But when we look at the way that it refers to the one who we would know of as Messiah, it talks about the fact that Yahweh will make his arm, will bear his arm. So it's almost as if the Most High, if he could have a body, reach down into time and eternity with his arm and did things. You can't see me moving my hand. But this is him though. But we understand it to be the Son. We understand it to be Yeshua. When we think about the Lamb of Elohim, who Yeshua is, who lived and dies. He lives and dies. If you die, that old covenant, the covenant that was, I don't mean the old covenant, the covenant that was, is null and void. Right? It's null and void. And so the only way that is he's able, the Father, to take back his bride, it's gotta be death. And he can't die. How's the Most High gonna die? But he can create this situation where somebody could come and be him in the flesh, and he can live and put on this sinful flesh and live like us and become the perfect sacrifice. But it's just his arm. It's just his word. It's just the physical representation of the invisible Elohim. And so when you think about this idea of divorce, it's interesting because under the law, the way that we could think about it is that he breaks this law if the son comes along and marries the wife. Right? But he nullifies everything when with his death, where he makes it possible for himself to marry again this lost bride, this one that went away. So even in the pictures, it remains congruent with the Torah. But if we're not thinking about it right, if we don't understand the nature of everything, you miss it.
That's why I say he has to be deity. He cannot just be his kid walking around and then just dying, and all of a sudden now I'm redeemed back to the Father. You know what I mean?
Yeah, how?
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
He has to be literally the manifestation of the living Elohim on this earth, and that's the only reason his death even means anything. There's a lot of people who die for people. There's people in the war. They always be giving those people the medals and all
Yeah,
that
the
stuff
people
after
died for
death.
me. They died for my freedom.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that died for me. I didn't even ask some of them to die for me.
I didn't ask any of them.
They just went ahead and did it, right?
Yeah.
So That didn't redeem me back to the Father.
No. Yeah.
That's deep too, because in the Torah, Moses talk about how the priest, he couldn't have a wife unless she was a virgin.
She was all the way.
That's the other part.
That's the
That's the other part. That's why we gotta die.
yeah, we got.
That's why we gotta die, because it don't matter if he takes care of it on both ends.
Yeah.
Is it where he make it possible for him to take the bride, and he make it possible for that nasty bride that we are to even be able, because everybody dies.
Amen.
Everybody,
Everybody dies.
and it's resurrected. And that's the point.
Bodies, right?
Okay, so everything, every T is crossed and every dot is placed in its place.
Yep.
Okay. Does anybody have any thoughts, questions, or comments about any of those things?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, you know, it's a blessing when things work, you know, but we've had people who came to our doors that were in just, you know, just unseemly, just things just totally outside of the realm of even understanding what things that these people have lived through. And, you know, it's you know, when people are in those type of positions, or just, you know, getting into situations they don't even know they got into, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, there's, to know that there is provision made with that bill, you know what I mean? Where they could be free and just released. You know, I see that as being something. And a lot of people, you know, I'm just saying, and we know, there's just been some crazy things. I don't even want to go into the examples.
Yeah.
But the ability to get that bill of divorce and then to be put away afterwards is, I think it's needed because of the hardness of these people, especially on the outside of the faith. And most of the people who take that strict staunch stance, like, you know, there's no divorce at all, you know, either they're in a good marriage or they got divorced before they even came to Yeshua. And so now they can say whatever they want because, you know, but then the people who come to Yeshua, you know, they come to the church, they come to the congregation, they're looking for freedom or whatever. Now it's like, well, it's too late because you already accepted them. And so I think that kind of puts a stumbling block in some paths, you know, where it's like they really do need that release and that freedom in order for them to just even live, you know.
Yeah.
Just want to put that out there.
Yeah, you know, it's you know, it can be a situation where, you know, you got people who they end up living their whole life because it really ends up being tradition. It really ends up being tradition, and you know, and people say, well, you know, there's no such thing as it. You know, he hates divorce, and so that means you could never like remarry
Or even divorce.
or even get a divorce, and somebody is just be like, they just live put away their whole
Yeah.
life.
You know, that
And so it's like you really, I think you really, it's necessary sometimes to actually be able to look at things and, you know, seek to understand what's going on. Because if you just really, if you take some of these things just at face value, you're not even looking at it right. But, you know, we saw that word that's translated as divorce, there's a word that means divorce, and that wasn't it. And so, you know, and people get caught up in these things, and it really ends up being bondage and oppression. And so, you know, the Most High, he wants for us to be free,
Right.
not in bondage. He frees us from bondage. He don't put us in bondage. And so, you know, we have to seek to really understand what it is that these words are saying, the way that he wants for us to be living, and know that he only wants life for us. He don't want bondage for us. He wants freedom for us. Right? He wants boundaries. He wants borders. He's lawful and in order, right? He's not chaos,
Right.
right? He's structured.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, we have to take all of these things into account when, you know, we seek to understand, you know, this word and, you know, the life that he has for us to live. And, you know, when we do that, you know, we can get to the bottom of some of these things. All right, so that being said, I think we will be done for now. Y'all willing, we'll be back on next Shabbat to continue with our look at the words of the Master and also the weekly Torah portion. But for now, we'll say Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.